Hello. Good evening, everyone. I'm Cathy Russ. I'm the president of the Metro Detroit Book and Author Society, and I'd like to welcome you to this next edition in our series of virtual events. Your support of these events allows us to continue our mission of promoting books, authors, and literacy. And normally we do that by hosting 2 luncheons per year, one in the spring and one in the fall, but for obvious reasons, we're not able to do that. So I'd really like to thank Mary and all of our authors who have been with us so far in our series, and for all of you for joining us, because your ticket purchase helps us to continue to give grants to libraries and other literacy organizations. I would also like to thank our partner, Pages Bookstore, for helping us out with the book sales. And we at Metro Detroit Book and Author Society really want to encourage you to support your local independent bookseller. It's so important, and it's the holiday season. So if you're thinking about giving any books as a gift, just please consider and keep your local independent bookstore in mind. It's just so important. So I would like to welcome our guest, Mary Norris, the comma queen. And she's a YouTube star with video clips about grammar and punctuation. So if you ever have a question about use who or whom or how to use a semicolon, you should check these out because they're short, they're funny, they're great, and you won't feel dumb or embarrassed. Mary was also a copy editor for the New Yorker magazine, and she is the author of Between You and Me, and the book that we are going to be speaking about tonight, which is, which you can't see, Greek to Me, Adventures of the Comma Queen. So welcome, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
It's great to have you. So, oh, sorry.
Were you going to say anything else?
I was just going to tell our audience. I'm so excited. I was just going to tell our audience that we have a treat for you tonight. Mary is going to take us on a tour of Greece. And when we come back here to our regular Zoom lives, we will take your questions. So we have disabled the chat feature on Zoom. So we invite you to ask your questions via the Q&A feature. And you can ask them throughout the presentation. And we will, when we come back, we will chat a little bit, Mary and I, and then we will take your questions. We'll try to get to them all. And so, you know, plenty of opportunity to do that. So with that, I will turn it over to Mary.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much, Cathy, and to the Metro Detroit Book and Author Society for having me. And I just was a little alarmed a moment ago because I got this message saying my internet connection was unstable. So I hope that we will be able, I hope that I don't freeze in place, which does happen sometimes. So I am going to share with you some slides, mostly pictures that I took in Greece. And, you know, the good thing about, well, there's nothing good about the pandemic, but one thing about meeting on Zoom instead of on a cruise ship in the Mediterranean is that you have more ability to go a lot of different places. You can overcome the time-space barrier. So that is, having said that, we're going to skip all over Greece, and bear with me while I share my screen and find what I want to show you tonight, which is this slideshow, which I'm going to play from the start with, forgive me, the self-promotion. If you look at this book cover closely, it's a mosaic of, I believe they are laurel leaves. And it was inspired by passages of the book that are, in fact, about mosaics. So here is a map of Greece. And I'm going to try to give you an idea of various places that we can go. Over here on the west coast of Greece, I've been to the island of Corfu. I've also been to the island of Kefalonia. These are in the Ionian Sea. And it's not named here on the map, but Ithaca is over here in the Ionian, off Kefalonia, I believe. So then we can go down through the Peloponnese This is the big peninsula of Greece, and off of it are three smaller peninsulas. And this middle one is known as the Mani. You can tell by the shading that it's very mountainous. And we're going to be coming back here for some of the pictures. Most cruises of, or guided tours of Greece, I was supposed to be a lecturer on a guided tour of Greece this past fall. And of course, that had to be canceled. And that tour was going to go, I believe, to the typical tourist places, which are Santorini. It would start in Piraeus and go to Santorini, and then Crete, which is not on the map. It's a big southerly island that is down here. And then I was excited about this. We were going to go over to Rhodes. Now, these islands in the middle, Naxos, Mykonos, Tinos, these are in, well, we would say Cyclades, but the Greeks pronounce that Kyklades. Those are in the center of everything. And these islands over here closer to Turkey are the Dodecanese. Dodeca is the Greek word for 12, and there are traditionally 12 of them. There are actually a lot more than 12, and to name the 12 is difficult. Now you can see I have been to Rhodes, and up here through Samos, Chios, and Lesvos, and it's above Lesvos, this place called Çanakkale in Turkey on the coast of Asia Minor. That is the site associated with ancient Troy, where Schliemann dug and found relics of ancient Troy. And then you can go around somehow over to Istanbul up here. If you're very lucky, you can get a ship. I arrived in Istanbul by bus, unfortunately. And it's a fascinating place. That was a Greek city. It was the center of Greece under Constantine, the city of Constantine, for hundreds of years. And then you can go back west toward the city of Thessaloniki, which is the second city of Greece. It's a university town and very lovely. And up here too, you have three peninsulas hanging off of the coast. The first one, Halkidiki, is a wonderful beach place. And I'm not sure whether it's the second or third is Mount Athos, where no women are allowed. It's for monks only, for Orthodox monks. And then we come back down through mainland Greece to Athens, which is, of course, the most important place. And from there, you can make day trips. There's one you can make to Delphi, which is particularly interesting. So because we can go anywhere we want, we're going to go straight to one of the beautiful spots. This is Patmos. And it's a picture I took of the sea. I mean, how could you look at that sea and not want to capture it somehow? Those shades of blue and the ripples and the smooth parts and the distant islands. I took this picture from a goat path, actually, that I got on accidentally, but I had no regrets once I found myself on the goat path, because look what I got to see. So Patmos has no classical sites on it. It has only biblical sites, and they're New Testament sites. One of the places there is named the Cave of the Apocalypse. This is the place where St. John, the theologian, was exiled, and not St. John the Evangelist. There are a lot of different Johns in history, actually, but you can get on a bus that has on its destination sign Apocalypse. And you can also go to the monastery of St. John, which is high on the mountain, and see, I think it's the relics of Doubting Thomas. Yes, his skull held together by bands. And I'm not that much of a believer, but for some reason I believe that really was the skull of Doubting Thomas. So you can look around on Patmos quite a lot. It's a place where a lot of Europeans have come to live, people from Germany, people from all over Scandinavia, and Americans too. Expatriates have come and tried to make a living there because they like it so much they want to stay. There are lovely, lovely beaches here, as well as lots of souvenir shops and restaurants, and you can walk all over the island. This is a view, by contrast, from Rhodes. This is the Acropolis of Rhodes. This is the beach that stretches out beneath the Acropolis. The god, I don't know if it really, well, the god that is associated most with Rhodes, I think, is Apollo, who is most associated with the sun. Helios is the name of the sun god, and from that we get a lot of words like heliotrope and the name of the sun god himself, Helios. So the Acropolis, this means the height, acro, of the city, polis. And there is a temple to Apollo up there. And it's also a place that people use to take off when they go kite surfing. So there's shades of Icarus who fell from the sky, but I didn't see any accidents happen. Everybody seemed to know what they were doing. We seem to have gotten the technology for flying down. There's also a temple up here to Athena, or there was a temple to Athena, but it is now a cell phone tower. This is a view from in the old town of Rhodes, of the rooftops up there. I had the great good luck of being able to be in Rhodes outside the tourist season. I was there in March. When tourists, the big cruise ships come to Rhodes and land, or they don't land, whatever, they dock there, and they are bigger than the old city of Rhodes themselves, and the people come and flock all over the city. The city doesn't look very Greek. It was built by crusaders, and for a long time, Mussolini, actually Italy, took over the Dodecanese Islands for a few generations. And Mussolini treated the castle in the old town of Rhodes as his summer cottage. So it's very interesting to walk around in the old town of Rhodes. The main street there is named for Socrates, and there's an intersection. You can meet people at the intersection of Socrates and Plato and go to a bakery there, which is kind of fun. Now, you saw, I think, how close Rhodes is to Turkey. This is a Muslim cemetery right outside the old town of Rhodes. And you can see that it's usually, you think of Greece in colors blue and white, but Greece has lots of other colors too. And here are some of them: this beautiful pale yellow and also a burgundy brick red. The Turks and the Greeks, the governments have, of course, been at war for centuries, but individual Greeks and Turks go back and forth quite a lot. You know, the government is not the people. And you meet a lot of Turks on Rhodes, and in Turkey you probably meet a lot of Greeks. They do go back and forth. But right outside this Muslim cemetery is the home of Lawrence Durrell, who was a wonderful writer and lived on Corfu and on Cyprus and in Rhodes, and he wrote books about all three of these places. The one about Rhodes is called Reflections on a Marine Venus. And that is, the Marine Venus is a stone Aphrodite who is on display in one of the museums in Rhodes. Now, it's not a trip to Greece unless you get on a ferry and go somewhere. And I never feel happier than when I'm on a ship in the Aegean. So I don't know, this was a ship I was not on, but I was on some ship when I took a picture of it. And I'm giving these pictures mostly so that you can enjoy the shades of blue. Whenever I'm in Greece, I tend to look down and just take a picture of whatever shades of blue are there. It was while I was on a ship in the Aegean that I realized what Homer meant with the epithet wine dark sea. It's not the color of wine that he was talking about. You know, I think of purple when I think of wine. I think of grapes. But what he meant, I believe, was that the sea has the quality of wine. That is, it draws you in, it attracts you, and it kind of mesmerizes you. That's certainly what has happened to me with the sea, the Aegean Sea around Greece. So we're going to go to the island of Paros. Paros, P-A-R-O-S, is one of the islands in the Cyclades, the Cyclades. The ferry comes into the town of Parikia, and this is very typical of a Greek island and travel on a Greek island. The ferries come into a deep port, in this Parikia, in the case of Paros, and then you take a bus or a taxi to one of the smaller harbors that can't accommodate a huge ferry, but where the locals keep their boats and where there are yachts docked. So this is Nausa, and there are restaurants there right along in the back here where you can have a meal and you can practically put your feet in the water. Paros is very beautiful and also modern. There are a lot of expats there from Britain, and the place is completely wired, no problem getting Wi-Fi on Paros. If you want someplace a little quieter and simpler, you can get a ferry from yet another harbor to the next place I'm trying to go to. This is Antiparos. Anti is a Greek prefix meaning opposite, and Antiparos is an island, smaller, opposite Paros, Antiparos. It's a lot simpler and a lot smaller, and one of its most famous residents is actually Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks there, yes. I didn't ever get to see him while I was there, but you can see how pretty it is. And my friend and I had a car that we took on the ferry, and we looked around for a while, and then we drove to the other side. So we wanted the most remote place that we could get, I suppose. So from Antiparos, the far side of Antiparos, we hired a boat, and the owner of the boat took us to this island, which is called Despotiko, and it's uninhabited. There is an archaeological site there, but the thing to do is to get off the boat, take a swim, have a picnic, do snorkeling, and when you've had enough, you call the boat owner, and he comes and he takes you back. So this was one of the more remote places that I visited in the Cyclades. This is just a taste of the Greek language. These are signs that I saw posted in Paros, Paralia Katholikou. Paralia is the Greek for beach. And this is not a beach for Catholics. This is Katholiko in the old sense of the Greek, meaning universal. So the Catholic beach actually means the public beach. Anyone can go here. And we can also go to the lighthouse. Pharos is the Greek word for lighthouse. I think it's also the Italian, we'd say Faro, F-A-R-O. And that's a wonderful place to go because, of course, you get this wonderful view. They don't let you take pictures up there, though, so I don't have any of those. I'm going to move through the next pictures because these are scenes of typical Greek things. And again, I use the word typical in the sense, in its original sense, it's a perfect type. It's the essence, typical Greece. And it's very typical of Greece to see blue painted doors, all different shades of blue. And this plaid outside this particular house is an oleander, I believe. And also, you also see a lot of oleanders in Greece. And this is a typical taverna, right on the sea. This was obviously before I figured out that I should try to keep my camera, my image horizontal, even with the horizon. But I took this so that you could see the typical Greek chairs, very narrow, not very comfortable, and the octopus. The octopus is hanging on the line. This is a sign, if nothing else, that the restaurant is open. They're ready to serve you an octopus. I don't eat octopus so much anymore because I have read about how smart they are, and I feel guilty when I eat octopus. The word octopus in English comes right from the Greek, octo for 8, and podia. Podia is the Greek, and podia are feet or legs. The podiatrist is an example of a word that comes from the Greek, podia, and iatrist is healer. So there we are, right on the sea, and we can order a glass of ouzo, and if we like some grilled octopus. This same cafe can be seen just about anywhere in Greece, or one very much like it. This is a friend I made on Patmos. Donkeys and mules in Greece have been replaced as pack animals by motor scooters, and I bet they're happy about it. This one was tethered somewhere and came over to say hi. They cut the grass. They're really mowers of lawns in Greece now. And they make, the first time I ever heard a donkey, I didn't know what it was. It sounded like a creaky door hinge to me. You see the word, the onomatopoeia for it in English is hee-haw, but it didn't sound anything like hee-haw. It sounded more like, it's, the syllables are reversed and it's spoken on the inhale instead of on the exhale. At least that's how it sounded to me, but I'm very fond of the donkeys of Greece. I thought I'd show you a quick selection of some of the flora of Greece. This gorse or broom was growing wild in roads in March, and it smelled wonderful. I had read about gorse and broom in English novels and never knew what it was, but somehow I knew exactly what this was as soon as I saw it. The Greek word for it escapes me. And this, I don't know what this pink flower is, but I took this picture mainly for the Greek flag. It's blue and white with a cross and blue and white stripes. And it dates from 1821, when the War of Independence of the Greeks against the Ottoman Turks started. It took a few years to win their independence, but next year, 2021, will be the bicentennial of the modern Greek nation. And if we could go there again by then, it would be wonderful. This was on Patmos, another walk to another beach with pictures of flowers on the way. And this is a stand of bougainvillea. You see this all over, and it makes the nicest contrast with blue and white. This stand is this was from Antiparos, but I've seen bougainvillea all over Greece, and you've probably seen it yourself in the Southwest. And I think the first place I ever saw it was Mexico, but it's just the best possible color to mix. There's a lot of it on the island of Mykonos, which is very picturesque and very expensive, and has lots of tourists on it usually, but probably not right now. And this is an unusual combination of passion flower growing on a prickly pear, which I saw when I was walking around the Mani in the town of Kardamili. I showed you on the map earlier where that place is, where the Mani, the middle peninsula of the three that hang down from the larger peninsula of the Peloponnese. Kardamili is near Kalamata, which is the place where the big purple olives come from that are so delicious. And Kardamili it was famous in ancient times. It was in Homer. It was the city promised to Achilles by Agamemnon in exchange for having taken his war bride. And it is now famous for being the home of Patrick Leigh Fermor. Leigh Fermor was a British travel writer and a wonderful one. He kind of really transcends the term travel writer. His most famous books about Greece are Mani, for this peninsula. It's very remote, and there are still blood feuds going on between families there, and they live in these very high castles because to keep anyone from scaling them, and they just have places up at the top that they can shoot out of. There's a lot of stone, and all of the homes there are built of the local stone, so they have a wonderful effect of having grown out of the land themselves, out of the rocky places. Patrick Lee Fermer also wrote a book called A Time of Gifts. He's someone who was all over Europe, and if he picked Kardamili to live there, you can be sure that it's one of the most beautiful places in Greece. I usually think I want to go to an island, but Kardamili was a very special place with beautiful coast and beautiful colors of water itself. Now we're on to Athens, where we should go first. And this scene, I thought I had taken this from an airplane, but then I looked in the foreground and it's from the Acropolis that I took this picture. This is a view from the Acropolis. The houses here, the nearest ones are the center of Athens, and you can see there's a church dome out here. And then there's a wide band of forest before the suburbs begin, and they climb up the hills and they go as far as the sea, which you can see there. That must be near Piraeus. So you can see that the city is very condensed. It's very crowded. There, it's like, in a sense, I suppose, like New York City, in that there's very little wasted space there. The buildings tend to be 4 to 6 stories, and they all have balconies, and they all have antennas sticking out of their roofs and little hot water heaters on them. And to me, it looks like a mosaic itself in pale colors, lots of white and gray, and that deep green. So if we want now to go, well, this is the Temple of Hephaestus. It's not on the Acropolis, but a beautiful, well-preserved temple. And for some reason, I couldn't find out why, it's surrounded by tortoises. A lot of turtles live there. So you can go and walk around it and visit with all the turtles if you want. This is where you have to get in line when you want to climb up the Acropolis. This picture was taken probably at mid-morning on a day in mid-May. And that is getting to be tourist season, but it is always crowded. There's always a great long line, and the people who are there early, they tend to be the lucky ones who are on tours whose operators have gotten them in before the Acropolis opened to the general public or after it closed. So if you're just hoi polloi, the people, the many, then you stand in line and you climb up with everybody else, and you can either be annoyed at the crowd or you can be thrilled by the fact that people are still coming to the top of the Acropolis to worship Athena. That's my route. I do love it. This is what you come to see. This is a temple of Athena Nike. Nike, of course, means victory, and that's why they named all the running shoes Nikes, for their hope of victory. And the Parthenon is for Athena Parthenos. Parthenos is the word for virgin. And so Athena has these different aspects, the way the Virgin Mary does in Catholicism. Catholicism, she is, someone as a virgin. I think that that citizens of Athens embraced her because it gave her plenty of time to devote to them. She didn't have to juggle a family or take care of kids, and she could devote herself to the well-being of Athens and to its victory. I should have some images of Athena. This is an Athena statue that is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and it's originally from the library at Pergamon in Asia Minor. You can see that she is wearing this thing called the aegis. It was a goat skin. This was a symbol of power that was given to her by Zeus, her father. And in the center is the shield of Athena. You can make out the features of the Medusa, her snaky hair. That is just to say that it's just to frighten people. Athena is not going to take any nonsense. You don't stand a chance against this goddess of war. Some other images of Athena. This is a famous one that is a bronze that is in the Museum of Piraeus. And in this image, you see that she has a much more tender face, and you can't make it out completely because of the way this photo is cropped now, but she wears a little owl on her helmet, and the helmet is another symbol of Athena, as is the owl, as is the olive. It was Athena who gave the olive to the Greeks, to Athens. She planted an olive tree on the Acropolis, and with that olive tree came all the knowledge of how to use it, how to get the essence of the earth out of this little bitter fruit that forms on the olive tree. And they used it for light, they used it for salads, they used it as ointment on their bodies, and they ate the olives themselves. So Athena was like good for using your resources to the best of your ability. She was also the goddess of some of the domestic arts like weaving. And that is another thing that shows that that Athena was one of the gods who cared about mortals. She actually cared about the welfare of Odysseus in particular. This image of Athena is from Delos. That is the uninhabited island sacred to Apollo that you can reach from ferry by Mykonos, but you can't spend the night there. It's a huge open-air archaeological museum and very beautiful. Mosaics, as I said at the outset, are one of my favorite art forms, and I had never seen this before. How do we even know it's Athena? I think she's the only goddess who wears a helmet. And also she has these beautiful eyes. And in Homer, there are always remarks on the quality of Athena's eyes. Glaukopis, meaning either gray-eyed or gleaming-eyed or possibly owl-eyed. The word is still alive and subject to interpretation. And finally, this is one of the most beautiful temples to Athena, called the Tholos. It is the temple of Athena at Delphi. It's just across the road and down from the sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi. When I first went to Delphi on my first trip to Greece, I found that people there lied a lot. It seemed like it was in the tradition of the confusing oracles, that we don't have a room for one person. We only have a room for two people. And, anyway, I still resent that I wasn't given a room with a view when I was in Delphi. However, I met the man who was the government guard at this temple, and he was very kind to me, and he even gave me 2 tiny chips of stone from the sanctuary that are precious to me. So that is my last slide, and I would be happy. I'm going to stop the slideshow now and go over to Cathy. Oops, I'm going to try to stop the slideshow now. No, I can't because I have this marker. There, stop share. Will it work? Yes.
Hey, there we go. So, audience members, please feel free to use the Q&A feature to submit your questions, and then Raya will pop up when we have some questions and pose them to Mary. So in the meantime, Mary, if you don't mind, I'll pose a few questions from me.
Sure.
So thank you, first of all, for that beautiful slideshow. And one of the things that struck me when you showed the slide of Paros, have you ever counted how many shades of blue there are in Greece? I mean, it's gorgeous, just gorgeous.
Yeah. I do, in the book, I actually have a catalog, like a Homeric catalog of shades of blue, because there was a theory from scientists at some point, possibly based on this phrase, wine dark sea, that Greeks did not see blue, which is nonsense, because there are references to various shades of blue all over in Homer, everything from indigo to cornflower and flax and all the shades of the sea. And the sea, of course, is also gray a lot and greenish a lot and silvery. So yes, there are all, I don't know that you could count them, but there are so many different words for different shades of blue, even in English. And it's hard to know exactly what each one connotes,
Well, one of the things too, when I was reading your book, and then now I can put it together with the slideshow. So you're originally from Cleveland, which is not too far from us in Detroit.
True.
And then to New York City. So the first time you went to Greece after having lived in, the great Midwest and then New York City, was it like sensory overload? I mean, all of the sun, the sky, the colors, the warmth, the beauty, just, just, how did you react to that?
Well, I actually, I'm glad you asked because although the book ranges over language, modern Greek and ancient Greek and the classics, it was the original inspiration for the book was to see the land of Greece, the land and sea. It was the travel. And I learned a little modern Greek because I think it's only polite to learn the language, if you can, of the people whose land you're visiting. So what I discovered while in Greece was that it's oh well, Athens has certainly been through a lot, and it's a very modern city, and it's very crowded. But all those things you hear about the light in Greece and the blues, I had an idea that the light would be sharp somehow, but instead it was softer than a harsh light, and it has this wonderful quality that it kind of sets off what it falls on, as if everything it falls on radiates it out somehow, like halos around everything. But it's a soft light. It's not overwhelming. I think it's a subtle pleasure. I Because I'd been a proofreader and copy editor full time, and that's hard on the eyes. I had terrible eye strain. So one of the reasons that I went to Greece and to the islands was so that I could see the horizon, so that I could train my eyes on that band between the earth and the sky and the sea and enjoy stretching my eyes like that. So I didn't faint or anything from sensory overload. I was expecting some of it, but it was so much more beautiful, than Lake Erie or Lake Michigan, or if I dare say, and kind of spoiled me. I think the Mediterranean, the Aegean, the Ionian, they are so many glorious shades of blue, really.
And so when we see pictures of Greece, it always looks like a postcard, the blue sky, the white, the sun. Have you ever been there in a storm? What's it like in a storm?
Oh, goodness, that's a good question. I've been there in the rain. I don't know that I've ever seen a huge, big storm. I've seen, the storm clouds are quite wonderful. They come from Zeus. and it can pelt. When I was on Cyprus, I was in a hailstorm driving, and that was kind of effective. The thing about storms, a big thunder and lightning storm, is that you realize the power of nature. There is nothing nothing gets your attention like a good old fashioned thunderstorm. And you realize that that's what the power of Zeus is. It's kind of, it's out of nowhere, right? It's out of the sky and you're helpless against it. There's just nothing you can do.
Those lightning bolts are just getting hurled at you, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I want to switch gears just a little bit. Your book, well, the Greek to me book in this case, and you kind of referenced this, but it's part travelogue, part memoir, and part study of Greek language and other languages as well, I think, thrown in. Was that because as the reader, what I thought was so great about it was everything's woven together very seamlessly and conversationally. It was very easy to read book, but you just it just flowed from travel to memoir to language. And I guess my question is how do you do it? Was that deliberate or especially having been a copy editor for so many years, sometimes copy editors have a hard time with the writing because you're copy editing as you go along. So,
well, it's true that copy editing has this occupational hazard, in my case, of making me too attuned to details. So, I could go, I like detours too. So I'm always going off on detours and to great detail. And I'm one of those writers who can't see the forest for the trees. So that's what a good editor is for. And I was very lucky, beginning with the first book, Between You and Me, to have a genius editor. His name is Matt Weiland at Norton. And Matt was good where I was bad. We made a good contrast. I was good on details, and was just a genius at the big picture. And it was Matt who kept saying we need to get a balance between these things. In the case of the grammar book, Between You and Me, it was a balance between grammar, instruction in grammar, my history at the New Yorker, and also the institutional history of the New Yorker. We didn't want it to be a New Yorker memoir. We wanted it to be more of a style and usage guide, but we didn't want it to be a straight style and usage guide. We wanted it, to have more personality, meaning style. But I would always, say, well, they want more me, and I'd give them way too much me. So then a lot of that stuff would have to be cut. And in the case of the Greek book, it worked pretty much the same way. It was not written seamlessly. I'm glad it seems seamless, but we were always trying to find the balance between my personal experience, travel, etymology, mythology, and trying to, get people to see that they could do this too. I always feel like anything I can do, others can do too. So, you can certainly go to Greece. I was determined that people would learn a little Greek in this book, but very gently, so that there'd be the English word, maybe the Greek word transliterated, and then later on I'd try to slip in the actual Greek and see if people would react like, what is this? Or if they would say, oh, I can almost read that word. So that's what I was hoping for. But my editor again kept saying, we're not going to teach anyone Greek. Oh, well, I tried.
So I think we have some questions. So if Raya's around, Raya, do you want to ask some questions of Mary?
Yeah, we have some great questions here in the Q&A. So I'll just remind all of you that you can get in on the Q&A action too. There's a button in your lower toolbar that says Q&A. It has some little thought bubble icons. And if you would like me to unmute you so that you can ask the question, we're trying that out. Just put a little asterisk next to your question so I know that instead of me reading it, you would like to read it yourself or to say hi to Mary. I'm just going to go in order of how they came in. And we're going to start with Midge. Hey, Midge. How much of the tradition of Zorba the Greek, if any, is evident in modern Greek society?
Oh, well, there is certainly the spirit of Zorba is there for sure. And I thought they were playing that music at the beginning, and the author of Zorba the Greek, Kazantzakis, is just really famous for being able to create characters that embody Greece, and both classical and modern. I mean, he wrote a sequel to the Odyssey, because the assumption was that Odysseus was such a traveler that after he'd been back on Ithaca for a while, he got bored. He got back out on a boat and went again, and Kazantzakis made more adventures for him. But this idea of a Greek as a lusty character who dances, that is in the Greeks. One of the things that I was first attracted to, I saw Zorba the Greek when I was a teenager, I think, at the Cleveland Playhouse. And one of the things I loved in it was the interactions between men. I had a very sheltered life. I didn't know anything about homosexuality, but I knew that men were afraid to kiss each other. And there was the physical affection between men, the slaps on the backs, the pokes and hugs. I was very moved by. And that is something that you see in Greece. There is a physical thing between the men. And Greek men dancing is one of my all-time favorite things. And they learn to dance with their souls. They're dancing as if this is their last chance to express how it is to be alive. And it's very, very beautiful tradition.
The joy. It must be fabulous.
Yes.
All right. Our next question is more of a comment, I guess, but Amanda Phillips wanted to say that her husband's family is from Andros and Monovasia in the Peloponnese, and it was so nice to see the Cyclades or the Cyclades featured here. So that's so nice, Amanda, that you got to see some of the home turf featured.
And I have also been to Monemvasia, which is a big egg of a mountain island and very interesting, and one of the last strongholds of Byzantium, of the Byzantine Empire in Greece, and very beautiful place. And I would go back there in a heartbeat. I really liked it. There's a famous poet from there too, Ritsos, Yanis Ritsos, whose poetry is very beautiful and had enough incident in his life for 80 different men, you know. He seemed to be involved in every phase of Greek life and war and literature, and came out with these very spare, elegant poems about it.
All right. Well, it's always great for some recommendations of both beautiful places and beautiful things to read. Speaking of beautiful things, Alicia Mazurek says, you take beautiful pictures. What kind of camera do you use? So
Thank you.
Talk about some of your photography?
Thank you very much. I discovered that the phone, I've been using a cell phone camera because it has just a very good camera on it. What I have is an Android. It's a Samsung, and the built-in camera on it. I hear that the iPhone has a wonderful camera too, but I got this one first and I love it. You can get really sharp detail, and then you can use all the, I don't like to change the color or the exposure, but I do like to crop. I do like to zoom in on details and frame things in a different way. But that's what I use. Once I discovered that the cell phone made such good pictures, I stopped carrying a camera.
I think a lot of us did.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's good to know. So, you know, it turns out you can get really good pictures even with your cell phone camera.
Oh, yes.
And speaking of great pictures, Amanda says, the colors and light are amazing. I was struck when I went the first time how much Greece has not changed over the centuries. Do you want to talk about, I mean, you've been on several trips to Greece over, you know, a number of years. Do you want to talk about sort of both the timeless quality of Greece, but also some of the changes that you've seen in the last, you know, number of years to how things look?
Well, I could start by saying about Athens that because Athens is an ancient city, I kind of expected it not to change from trip to trip, surely. So my very first map of Athens from 1983, I kept taking back with me 20 years later. And guess what? It does change. It's a very dynamic city. It had a different airport, which they built for the Olympics in, was it 2000?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so a lot in Athens changed around the Olympics. The metro, they have a wonderful subway system, the Metropolitana. And of course, it took them a long time to build because they kept digging up beautiful, you know, old things and would have to stop digging and have all of the artifacts assessed. And so it took a very long time to get that metro system up and running. But then there are the things that don't change, of course, are the natural things. They're, you know, this is what I just so admire about Greece. They have a lot of stones. And they make temples out of them. They use the stones and in a way that enhances the landscape, and the landscape enhances them. So those things, of course, have not changed for centuries, but they don't look like they used to. Apparently, in ancient times, the Parthenon was painted in a lot of bright colors because the Greeks used anything available, any art form, any kind of paint or sculpting tools. They used whatever they could. So there are traces of color on them, of blues and greens and reds, and of gilding, of gold leaf and ivory. And we're used to seeing them all pure like that. I believe the ones that went to the British Museum were sanded down so that they would be whiter and more gleaming. And there are books. Chromaticism in ancient art is hard to accept. We don't like it. We don't like the garishness. We think that the pure white marble is what is most beautiful. But it was different then, and now we like, oh well, there's nothing more beautiful than that warm marble and all of the markings that you see in it. But the landscape things, I'm sure that there are things that have changed. There's a big old highway that's cut through parts of mainland Greece, from Athens to Corinth and then beyond. But there are also still beautiful olive groves. And last time I was there were dolphins that leapt in the sea. And the view of the distant islands when you're on one doesn't change. The sheep, the things that people keep, the tinkle of the sheep's bells, and the mulberry trees. And now I could wax pretty poetic about this, I guess, but the colors that are described in Homer are still, that sea, they're still there. I was talking briefly about the scenery from Kardamili, and that is a place where the Mount Taygetos there's a lot of pines and cypress trees on it. And I think it's that deep green when it hits what is reflected in the sea that makes this beautiful shade that has equal parts blue, gray, and green in it, all deep saturated shades, and that I can never take my eyes off of when I go there. I just look and eat olives.
Well, I'm glad you talked about eating olives, because Amanda also had a question about food, which is so central to life in Greece, and wants to know, what is your favorite food? Or if you can't pick just one, then maybe a few.
Well, I love a glass of ouzo and the ritual that surrounds it. You take just a glass of ouzo and add ice to it and then a little water and it turns milky. And they always serve a little, what they call mezevakia. Meze we might translate it as tidbits, little appetizers that, olives, little cubes of feta cheese, dipping things. Not, the Italians now dip bread in olive oil, but I don't believe that the Greeks are doing that. But one of my favorite foods is a cheese pie, tiropita. The feta cheese and the layers of phyllo dough that go into it it makes a really nice lunch, or you can have just a teeny one. And also the salad, the koriatiki salata, which the Greek salad gets kind of a bad name in the States because it's not made the way the Greeks make salad. The word comes from the kora, I think, which means village. And the idea of this salad is that it's made of whatever you happen to have in your garden. So the base is tomatoes and cucumbers and some green peppers, and then some nice big fat Kalamata olives if you have them, feta cheese, and oregano sprinkled on top and dressed very simply with olive oil and maybe, You don't even need it, but a squirt of lemon. Some people like to put anchovies on it, and that you can put parsley in it. You can put anything you want in it. The Greeks do not eat basil. The Greeks use basil for religious purposes. They use the Greek priest will use a bunch of basil to dip in the holy water and sprinkle on the crowd. I guess it's too holy to eat. But those are some of them. And of course, I love the fish. I will shrimp in various styles that the different islands have developed. And the local Greek wines. It's another thing. The Greeks invented wine, and the Italians and the French kind of took over from there, but there are still excellent Greek wines that get ignored. Assyrtiko is a wine from Santorini that is a nice, dry, minerally white wine. And there's a red wine from Nemea in the Peloponnese. Iorgitikos is named after St. George, but Nemea is where Heracles conquered whatever he did, hunt down and kill the Nemean lion, and that's where he got his lion skin that he always wore.
One of the things I appreciated about your book is now I feel like I have a sense on how to actually pronounce some of these words, because I realized that because I took much to my dad's dismay, I took a lot of mythology classes in college, and the way that I pronounce things in my head is not the way that they are pronounced. So we don't have a lot of time left, but I think we have time for a couple more questions. And I wanted to ask you, Mary, you've been to Greece by yourself and with friends. Do you have any advice for a solo traveler? Any tips that you've learned over the years traveling by yourself that you think is important for somebody who maybe wanting to go, but is a little bit scared to go by themselves?
Well, I don't think that anybody needs to be afraid to go. Probably the thing that was hardest for me is that when you're by yourself, people like to tell you where to go. They like to give you a lot of advice and suggestions, and you have to have the courage. What I finally learned was you let them talk as much as they want, and then you do what you wanted to do in the first place. That's the way to go. I don't think that it is dangerous. Certainly the islands, there's very little crime on the islands. We have had examples of violence in Athens, I think, not unusual in a big city where there are poor people and where they have been taxed the way the Greeks have been, between the corruption in their own government and then the influx of all of the refugees from the Middle East. There's a lot of pressure on Greece right now. But again, you hear stories, but people are people, and you can be very lucky and meet some really nice people. You can have some bad luck and meet some kind of stupid people. And one thing that you have to be careful of is that the Greeks there is a type of cleverness that the Greeks admire, and it's cheating people sometimes. There's that's actually in the mythology too. The god Hermes, the god of the traveling god, he's also the god of shopkeepers, and I think he's the god of thieves. And all I'm saying is that they have their tricks. If you see something in a souvenir shop and it has a little sticker on it that says the price and you like it, by the time that you get to the register, somebody has whipped off that little tag and will charge you. You say, I thought that was only €8, and suddenly it's 16, and you have no way to prove it, So you have to be a little careful, because people will squeeze as much money out of you as they can, frankly, but it's still not that much.
I don't know if that's unique to Greece, though, honestly.
There's that, yes. But I don't think you need to. Women traveling alone, I don't think you have to worry about. Nobody's going to make you do anything or go anywhere that you don't want to.
Right. I don't want to, I didn't mean to interrupt questions. Do we have any more questions?
Well, we have just a couple of people talking about Retsina.
Oh, Retsina.
So a favorite wine and wanting to know about, do you like it?
Retsina, as you know, is taste to some people like turpentine, supposedly because it's been stored in barrels made of pine, and the rosin is the word that we have that's close to Retsina. But in fact, it turns out that the flavor is added to the wine, and Greeks like it. And I like it too. It's just that once you start drinking Retsina, you have to stick to Retsina. Otherwise, you feel really bad the next day. But if you just drink Retsina, it's fine. And there are some good brands of it available. And the New York Times once did a whole piece on Retsina. Then there are people who point out that an anagram of Retsina is nastier. But Retsina has a bad reputation, but it's better than most people think it is. And I do like it.
Well, I think we're coming to the end of our time, but before I let you go, can you tell us what you're working on? What is there another book in the offing? What can we look forward to from you?
Well, the thing that I'm working on right now is I have acquired the archive of a man I worked for at the New Yorker. His name was Edward Stringham, and he is the person, he was my boss when I was in the collating department, and he's the person who introduced me to Greece, who first encouraged me to start studying Greece and Greek and to travel in Greece. And he left, he was alone at the end, and when he died, he left everything to a former employee of his and a friend named Vicky, who's from Detroit, by the way, Vicky Gardens. And I went up and got that archive from Vicky, who lives in Rhode Island. And I'm working now on trying to find a home for the archive and sorting through it and seeing if I can write something about Ed Stringham. And it's not clear if anything larger would develop from that or not. But he did know a lot of people in literature and the arts. And there is some correspondence. And I'm sure that there's a lot more there that I haven't uncovered yet. So that's my current project, is I'm looking into the archive of my former boss and old friend Ed Stringham.
Well, and he appears in Greek to me, and the way that you described him, I mean, and I think you even referred to, as a character. I mean, he definitely had his own style and manner of doing things, and didn't, like he stayed up all night and just kind of hung out there, and just I pictured him, across almost, I'm sorry, I hope this isn't, but like J. Jonah Jameson from Spider, like just that wise, kind of grizzled, cool guy dispensing advice and taking the newbie under his wing and encouraging you. He seemed like a good guy.
Very encouraging. He had been at Columbia up in the Upper West Side in the 40s and 50s when Jack Kerouac was hanging up there. So he was an old beat. But instead of going crazy like the Beats and going cross country in cars, he got a job at the New Yorker and started reading. He tried to read everything in the Western canon in a very systematic way. He's an amazing man, actually. One of the things I have, my book, Between You and Me, is being translated into Japanese. And it was interesting, they wanted to put subheads between the chapters to help the Japanese readers. And one of the subheads was The Holy Land of Weirdos.
Is that New York City?
I think it's the New Yorker, actually. And I think that's going to be the working title of my next book, The Holy Land of Weirdos.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's probably as good of note to end on as any, right? So, Mary, I want to thank you so much on behalf of the Metro Detroit Book and Author Society Board and our audience members. Thank you so much. And audience, you haven't read Greek to Me, you really need to read it. It's fun, it's beautiful, you will learn, but in such a very easy and pleasant way. And it makes you want this pandemic to be over so you can go to Greece and eat the food and see the colors. And just so, Mary, thank you so much for joining us
That
tonight.
is so. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who stayed around and listened to me talk, and to all of the technical help, and to you in Detroit. Thank you so much.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much. We hope you'll come back and see us again.
I'd love to. Thank you.
Have a good night. And everybody, we hope to see you next time. Our next event is on December 21st. And we're featuring Karen Dion, who wrote The Marsh King's Daughter and the Wicked Sister, and tickets are available on the Book and Author Society website, bookandauthor.org. So please join us again in 2 weeks, and we'll talk to Karen Dion. She is going to take us on a tour of Michigan's Upper Peninsula and show us some of the sites of some of her books. So come on back and see us. Take care, everybody. Have a good night. Bye.